Friends, welcome to my YouTube channel Hassan Tech. Today I can tell you about the second part of human brain, cerebrum. The outermost membrane of the cerebral cortex is the basement membrane of the PIA matter called the glia limitans and is an important part of the blood-brain barrier. The living brain is very soft, having a gel-like consistency similar to soft tofu. The cortical layers of neurons constitute much of the cerebral gray matter, while the deeper subcortical regions of myelinated axons make up the white matter. The white matter of the brain makes up about half of the total brain volume. Cerebrum. The cerebrum is the largest part of the brain and is divided into nearly symmetrical left and right hemispheres by a deep groove, the longitudinal spheres. Asymmetry between the lobes is noted as a petalia. The hemispheres are connected by five commissures that span the longitudinal spheres. The largest of these is the corpus callosum. Each hemisphere is conventionally divided into four main lobes: the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, and occipital lobe, named according to the skull bones that overlie them. Each lobe is associated with one or two specialized functions, though there is some functional overlap between them. The surface of the brain is folded into ridges and grooves, many of which are named usually according to their position, such as the frontal gyrus of the frontal lobe or the central sulcus separating the central regions of the hemispheres. There are many small variations in the secondary and tertiary folds. The outer part of the cerebrum is the cerebral cortex, made up of gray matter arranged in layers. It is 2 to 4 millimeters, 0.079 to 0.157 in thick and deeply folded to give a convoluted appearance. Beneath the cortex is the cerebral white matter. The largest part of the cerebral cortex is the neocortex, which has 6 neural layers. The rest of the cortex is of allocortex, which has 3 or 4 layers. The cortex is mapped by divisions into about 50 different functional areas known as Brodmann's areas. These areas are distinctly different when seen under a microscope. The cortex is divided into two main functional areas, a motor cortex and a sensory cortex. The primary motor cortex, which sends axons down to motor neurons in the brainstem and spinal cord, occupies the rear portion of the frontal lobe directly in front of the somatosensory area. The primary sensory areas receive signals from the sensory nerves and the tracts by way of relay nuclei in the thalamus. Primary sensory areas include the visual cortex of the occipital lobe, the auditory cortex in parts of the temporal lobe and insular cortex, and the somatosensory cortex in the partial lobe. The remaining parts of the cortex are called the association areas. These areas receive input from the sensory areas, and lower parts of the brain are involved in the complex cognitive processes of perception, through and decision making. The main functions of the frontal lobe are to control attention, abstract thinking, behavior, problem solving, task, and physical reactions and personality. The occipital lobe is the smallest lobe. Its main functions are visual reception, visual spatial processing, movement, and color recognition. There is a small occipital lobe in the lobe known as the senescence. The temporal lobe controls auditory and visual memories, languages, and some hearing and speech. The temporal lobe controls auditory and visual memories, language, and some hearing and speech.